Kael sprinted through the rain-soaked alley, blood pounding in his ears as he closed in on the renegade prince. Water splashed beneath his heavy boots, the impact reverberating up his legs with each forceful stride. The downpour had transformed Duskhaven's industrial quarter into a maze of reflective surfaces, amber streetlights fragmenting across puddles like shattered gold. His mechanical heart thrummed steadily in his chest, its rhythmic pulse unwavering despite the exertion. Unlike the organic organs of other men, his never quickened with fear or anticipation, a blessing in pursuit, a curse in quieter moments. "The Eastern District," he muttered into the communicator at his wrist. "They're heading for the old cathedral." Static crackled back at him. "Understood," came the clipped response of his commander. "Apprehend the traitor and the witch. No witnesses." No witnesses. The words echoed in his mind as he vaulted over a fallen storage container, his enhanced muscles propelling him higher and farther than any natural human could achieve. The Ironbound weren't known for their subtlety, but tonight's mission required finesse. Prince Aldrin had evaded capture for 3 months. The Emperor's patience had worn thin. Through the curtain of rain, Kael caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of silver hair, and the billowing edge of a dark cloak disappearing around a corner. The mage, Silara. Where she went, the prince would follow. Kael adjusted his trajectory, metal plates beneath his skin shifting to accommodate the sudden change in direction. The enhancements integrated into his flesh hummed with power, drawing strength from his artificial heart. His right hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his blade as he rounded the corner, entering a wide, debris-strewn courtyard. There it stood, the abandoned cathedral, a relic from before the Emperor's ascension, its once magnificent spires now jagged teeth against the night sky, stained glass windows broken like fractured rainbows. A monument to old gods and older beliefs, forgotten in the Emperor's new age of reason and prosperity, and the perfect place for traitors to hide. Kael slowed his pace, scanning the cathedral's facade. Rain streamed down his face, collecting at the edge of his jaw before dripping onto his armored chest. The emblem of the Ironbound, a fist encased in metal, glinted dully in what little light penetrated the storm clouds. The massive wooden doors of the cathedral hung askew, one nearly torn from its hinges. Kael approached with measured steps, drawing his blade with practiced efficiency. The weapon hummed to life in his grip, its edge glowing with a faint blue luminescence, standard issue for the Ironbound elite. "For the Divine Emperor," Kael whispered, the words both prayer and promise. Then he stepped through the threshold and into darkness. Water dripped from broken rafters, the steady plink echoing through the cathedral's vast interior. Shafts of amber light filtered through the fractured stained glass, casting prismatic patterns across shattered pews and crumbling stone. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay and abandonment. Yet beneath it lay something else, the sharp, metallic tang of arcane energy. Kael moved with deliberate silence, each footfall placed with precision born from years of training. His enhanced vision adjusted quickly to the gloom, scanning the shadowed alcoves and collapsed sections of the ceiling. They were here. He could sense them. The stillness broke with a voice. "I wonder," said Prince Aldrin, stepping from behind a cracked pillar, "if you truly understand what it is you're fighting for." Kael pivoted, blade rising to defensive position. The prince stood 20 paces away, looking far less regal than in the images provided by Mission Command. His fine features were hardened by months on the run, once perfectly maintained dark hair now longer and tied back from his face. His armor, a curious blend of royal craftsmanship and practical reinforcement, bore the scars of recent conflicts. Prince Aldrin was soon to be ruler of one of the smaller provinces of the kingdom, the mystery of his rebellion unknown, yet ultimately immaterial. Such insurrection, regardless of its roots, demanded swift extinguishment. Those who served the throne knew well that peace was a delicate creature, easily startled by whispers of defiance. "Surrender now," Kael ordered, voice cutting through the cathedral's hush, "and you may yet receive the Emperor's mercy." A soft laugh emanated from the shadows to Kael's left. Solara emerged, silver hair gleaming like liquid moonlight even in the dim cathedral. Her eyes held an unnatural glow, the mark of one who channeled arcane energies. Such practices had been outlawed since the Emperor's rise, deemed dangerous and primitive. "The Emperor's mercy," she repeated, as if tasting something bitter. "Tell me, Ironbound, have you ever questioned why a merciful ruler needs men like you?" Kael's jaw tightened. "I don't question. I serve." "A naive stance," Aldrin jabbed, drawing his sword with fluid grace. The blade was slimmer than Kael's, designed for speed rather than force. "Hardly," Kael countered, shifting his stance to keep both opponents in view. "The Emperor saved us from ourselves, from the resource wars that nearly destroyed Calvaris." Aldrin's expression darkened. "Is that what they told you, after they put that machine in your chest? That your loyalty would help maintain a perfect peace?" Kael lunged forward, patience exhausted. His blade cut through the air with lethal precision, aimed at the prince's throat. Aldrin moved like water, stepping aside at the last moment, using Kael's momentum against him. Their blades met in a shower of sparks. The impact felt up the length of Kael's arm. "You're strong," Aldrin acknowledged, disengaging with a graceful backstep. "But strength isn't everything." Before Kael could respond, he sensed movement from his flank. Solara's hands wove intricate patterns through the air, leaving trails of silver-blue light. The arcane words she uttered seemed to bend the very atmosphere. Kael pivoted, raising his arm to block whatever magic she summoned. But he was too slow. A wave of kinetic force slammed into him, lifting him off his feet and hurling him backward. His body crashed against a stone pillar, the impact sending fragments of ancient masonry raining down around him. His mechanical heart surged, pumping reinforced blood through his system to compensate for the damage. Pain registered immediately, and data points filled his visual display. 3 cracked ribs, minor concussion, dislocated shoulder. Nothing critical, nothing that would stop him. Kael pushed himself up, shards of stone sliding from his shoulders. Through the dust and pain, a memory surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. 5 years prior. Blood soaked the battlefield, turning mud into a crimson slurry that pulled at boots and bodies alike. The screams of the dying formed a hellish chorus that had long since faded into background noise. 3 days into the battle, and the air itself seemed to taste of iron and desperation. "Hold the line!" His captain's voice, hoarse from hours of shouting, barely carried over the din of combat. "The Western reserves are depleted. We cannot yield this ground." Kael raised his plasma rifle, sighting down its length at the approaching wave of combative forces. Their green uniforms were caked with the same mud that covered Kael's own royal blue. The oncoming mass of rage and desperation was the enemy, or so he'd been told. In truth, they fought for the same reasons his own people did: survival, resources, water rights to the dwindling Kava River. The irony wasn't lost on him as he fired, watching another body fall to the ground. They were killing each other over water while standing ankle deep in a mixture of it and their comrades' blood. His squad advanced under covering fire, moving from the relative safety of their trench into the contested no-man's land. Artillery screamed overhead. The distant thump of its launch, followed seconds later by the earth-shattering impact nearby. Too close, Kael felt the shockwave before he heard the explosion. Heat and pressure washed over him, lifting him from his feet and sending him tumbling through the air like a discarded doll. The world spun, sky and earth trading places in a dizzying blur until he crashed back to the ground. Silence descended, punctuated only by a high-pitched ringing in his ears. Kael tried to move, to call out, but his body refused to respond. The taste of copper filled his mouth. He managed to turn his head, seeing the crater where his squad had been moments before. Nothing remained but scattered equipment and unrecognizable remains. Cold began to seep into his limbs, a numbing counterpoint to the burning in his chest. He looked down, seeing the jagged metal fragment protruding from his torso. Each heartbeat pushed more blood around the intrusion, staining his uniform a darker shade of blue. The sky above darkened, not with clouds, but with the encroaching veil of unconsciousness. As his vision faded, Kael saw a figure standing over him, backlit by the orange glow of distant fires. Then darkness, complete and absolute, until light, blinding and artificial, the sterile scent of antiseptic. Voices, clinical and detached. Subject responds well to the implant. Heart functions at 176% efficiency compared to the biological original. Kael's eyes had opened to a new world. His chest now housed a machine, its steady hum a constant reminder of his second chance at life. And standing beside his bed, radiant with power and benevolence, was the divine emperor himself, the savior who had brought peace to their dying world. "You will serve," the emperor had said, his voice resonating with authority. "You will become iron-bound, a protector of our new prosperity." The memory dissolved as quickly as it had formed, leaving Kael back in the present, back in the cathedral, facing two enemies of the peace he had sworn to protect. The peace that had saved him, that had ended the senseless bloodshed of the wars that came before. He wouldn't fail. He couldn't. His heart accelerated, pumping blood faster through his system. The implants beneath his skin heated as they prepared for combat mode, flooding his muscles with stimulants designed to push human limitations. Kael launched himself forward with renewed vigor, his movements a blur of precision and power. His blade sang through the air as he engaged Aldrin, each strike calculated to drive the prince back, to separate him from his mage companion. "You're fighting for a lie," Aldrin shouted, parrying a vicious downward cut that would have split him from shoulder to hip. "Everything you believe about the Emperor, it's a farce." Kael pressed his advantage, his mechanically enhanced strength forcing Aldrin to give ground. "Save your propaganda," he growled, twisting his blade to slip past the prince's guard. The edge caught Aldrin's arm, drawing a thin line of blood. Triumph flashed through Kael, quickly extinguished as a bolt of arcane energy struck his side. Pain exploded along his ribs, driving him to one knee. Solara advanced, her hands trailing wisps of silver-blue power. "He doesn't want to kill you," she said, voice surprisingly gentle despite the circumstances. "And neither do I. You're different from the others. Your heart—" "You know nothing about my heart," Kael snarled, pushing back to his feet. His side burned where her magic had struck, but his enhancements were already working to mitigate the damage. A gift from the Emperor. an investment in our future. A gift or a purchase of loyalty? Aldrin prodded, circling to Kael's right, forcing him to divide his attention. Kael lunged at the prince, his patience wearing thin. He feinted left, then spun right, using his momentum to power a sweeping strike at Aldrin's legs. The prince jumped, avoiding the blade by inches, but Kael had anticipated this. His left hand shot out, catching Aldrin's ankle mid-air and yanking downward. The prince crashed to the stone floor, his sword skittering away across ancient tiles. Kael stood over him, blade poised for a killing strike. "Enough," he said, voice cold with finality. "Your rebellion ends here." "If you kill him," Solara called from behind, "you condemn all of humanity to a slow, consuming death." Kael hesitated, blade still raised. More dramatic claims won't save him. "It's not drama," Aldrin said, meeting Kael's gaze without fear. "It's the truth." And then he said it. "The Emperor you serve isn't human. He never was. He's a parasite from a distant planet, a manipulator and a con artist, a devil wearing human skin. His kind are feeding on our world, on the very people you claim to protect." Something in the prince's voice, a certainty, a resignation, gave Kael pause. He'd interrogated liars before, had seen desperation in the eyes of captured enemies. This was different. This was the calm conviction of a man stating fundamental fact. His hesitation cost him. Solara's magic slammed into him from behind, a concussive force that sent him staggering forward. Aldrin rolled aside, reclaiming his sword in one fluid motion. Before Kael could recover, he found himself facing both opponents, their expressions grim with determination. "Kill me now," Aldrin said, "and you'll never know if I'm lying. Spare me, and I can show you proof." Kael's muscles tensed, ready to spring. He could still complete his mission. The prince was skilled but not enhanced. The mage was powerful but physically vulnerable. 2 quick strikes and it could be over with. And yet, doubt lingered, not in his ability to kill them, but in the righteousness of his cause. How many rebels had he eliminated in the Emperor's name? How many fires had been put out in the name of protecting the forest? "What proof?" Kael asked, not lowering his weapon. Rain continued to drum against the cathedral roof, finding new paths through the broken ceiling to pool on the ancient floor. In the distance, thunder rolled across Duskhaven's skyline. "Your mechanical heart makes you immune," Solara said quietly. "The parasites can't attach to it, can't influence you like they do others. I can show you the truth of this world." Kael's sword wavered, the weapon suddenly feeling heavier in his grip. "Ridiculous," he said, but the conviction had drained from his voice. He remembered the vacant expressions of citizens after the Emperor's speeches, the unquestioning obedience that had replaced the chaos of war. He'd attributed it to relief, to gratitude for the peace that had been established. What if it was something else entirely? "We can prove it," Aldrin said, stepping forward despite Solara's warning hand on his arm. "But not here. The rest of your comrades will arrive soon." Kael stiffened. "You want me to defect? To betray everything I've stood for?" "We want you to see the truth," Solara answered. "After that, your choices are your own." His communicator crackled to life, the voice of his commander cutting through the tense silence. "Status report, soldier. Have you apprehended the targets?" Kael knew he should respond, should call for backup, should complete his mission. Instead, he looked at the prince, the man he'd been hunting for months, the greatest threat to the peace of Calvaris. Not crazy, not a power-hungry usurper, but a man with clear eyes and unwavering purpose. The rain dripped through the broken ceiling, pooling in cracks of the stone floor. Kael looked at Aldrin and Solara, the only ones fighting against a tide he couldn't yet see. The weight of his duty clashed with the gnawing fear that he had been on the wrong side all along. Finally, Kael exhaled, the resolve in his voice quieter than he expected. "Prove it." He sheathed his sword, stepping forward to stand beside the prince and the mage. His communicator crackled again, more insistent. "Iron-bound Kael, report. Troops are en route to your location. What is your status?" Kael raised his wrist, hesitated for one mechanical heartbeat, two, then crushed the device in his grip. "We need to move," he said, turning to his new allies. "Let's go." To those who have endured this journey, my deepest thanks. This is but the first chapter of a far greater saga. Part 2 awaits, drawing ever closer. The tale will continue in the near future. Until then, remember, even in darkness, the story is never truly over.